Greetings once again and welcome to this edition of Faith to Live By. I'm Pam Christian, the creator, researcher, writer, producer, and host of this podcast, where each week I help us explore current events from a biblical and prophetic perspective. If you didn't hear last 2 weeks' podcast, I hope you will, because I explored world events in light of what our prophets have said about 2026, specifically with January being the month of justice. And a quick shout out to Elizabeth, who wrote me saying she really liked last week's podcast, enough that she listened to it twice. Thanks for the encouragement, Elizabeth. My regular listeners know I try to bring prophecy, current events, and also history when needed to help us better understand our present times so we, as God's children, can know how He wants us to respond. As I promised last week, the topic for today's show will focus on each of us finding our God-intended created purpose and our specific place in His plans for the world today. In order for us to do that, we first need to have an understanding of God's general plan, which in turn will help us prayerfully identify His specific plan for our individual lives. In this process, I ask each of you to honestly consider yourself before the Lord. Consider, what are the 1 to 3 current issues that really trouble me the most? What would I like to see done about correcting these issues? And how am I qualified to be able to help in some way for this wrong to be corrected? Since I started this podcast, I've been working to convince us of the importance for each of us becoming engaged in what God is doing so we can see the evils of our world overcome. There is no doubt we are in a spiritual battle of good versus evil, and I'm convinced God has allowed you and allowed me to be alive in these very days because He wants us to be instrumental in restoring righteousness. On the basis of knowing each of us has been created by God for good works, Ephesians 2:10, Titus 2:14, and Matthew 5:16, knowing that we who belong to God the Father through faith in Jesus Christ have been specifically commissioned to share the gospel and make disciples of all nations, Matthew 28:18-20, and to bring God's kingdom will to be done on earth as it is in heaven, Luke 11:2, knowing that we have been instructed to occupy until Christ returns, Luke 19:13, which we have clearly failed to do, and having been addressed by God through His modern-day prophets to repent of our apathy and to intentionally become engaged in what He is doing in these very days, my goal today is to place emphasis on what God is asking of you, asking of me, asking of each of us in this particular point in His timeline. For the past 5+ years, especially since the advent of COVID-19, God has been waking all humanity up to the reality of the condition of the world. Since Jesus has already come to this earth and secured victory over all evil, since Jesus has called His followers to do His will, since Jesus has given us everything we need to succeed in anything He asks us to do, God's people are without excuse. Whatever we see in our immediate sphere of influence that we know is wrong, that needs to be corrected, whatever troubles us is an indicator of where God intends us to apply our talents and gifts to bring it into alignment with God's will. Each of us is wired and fully equipped to do whatever God asks of us. Some people hesitate to go to God to ask what He wants them to do for fear He will send them to some third world country to live in a mud hut with a thatch roof and a dirt floor with no electricity or running water. Well, guess what? If that's what God wants of you, then He has not only already fully equipped you to do the task in that environment, He has also already put the desire in your heart so that you will actually want to go and do what He instructs. God knows the many tasks that need to be done to take back areas where evil has advanced in our day. He has purposed for each of us who are alive today to do what needs to be done. And according to Psalm 37:4, He gives to each of us the desires of our heart. That promise from God is not for any selfish wish, as so many like to apply it. That promise means when you genuinely delight and seek the Lord, your desires become aligned with His will, and He fulfills those godly desires that bring true joy and fulfillment. It's about transforming your heart's longings to match His, so what you want becomes what He wants for you, leading to a blessed life. I am one who has always and immediately bristled when I see or hear of an injustice, and I have never had any problem with immediately getting involved to help see that injustice corrected. As a teenager, I saw a younger girl horribly mistreating a kitten, and without even thinking about it, I approached her and told her since she wasn't treating the kitten correctly, she didn't deserve to have it, and I took it from her. In high school, I must have already become known for wanting justice because the girls on our drill team asked me to help them get fair treatment from our student council compared to the funds that were allocated to the band for uniforms and equipment. And as an adult, my focus has been directed to making sure truth is known, which is why I had to start this podcast in 2020 when attempts were being made to grossly control us with lies. One of my first brand statements I still use today is exposing the lies, revealing the truth, and empowering the faithful. Many people thought I would have been an attorney or get into politics. To this day, I have friends who have said they wished I was trained to be their attorney. For me, my path of wanting to know and to defend truth has led me to become involved in Christian education, resulting in teaching, speaking, writing articles and blogs, and of course my book series, and hosting traditional radio and now this podcast. So for me, not just a sense of justice, but a talent or a desire for media has come into play. Others driven by justice might be attracted to work to promote human rights or animal rights, or in the foster care or adoption sectors, perhaps to become an attorney of family, civil, or criminal law. The point is to know what you are driven by and what your passions are, and to prayerfully find out where God wants you to apply that passion, your gifts, and your talents for His kingdom will to be done on earth as it is in heaven. Remember the 7 mountains of society: religion, family, government, business/economics, education, media, and arts/entertainment. You are certain to be called by God to work in at least one of the 7 mountains of society. So I ask you to first identify your passion. What drives you? Second, identify what specific area you are most interested in expressing that passion. Third, how should you go about fulfilling your purpose as a volunteer or as an income-earning career? Anytime our income-earning work can be what we love doing, then our jobs are not a chore but a labor of love. Regardless if we are able to earn an income doing what God has equipped and called us to do or not, it will still be a labor of love we will have an appreciable measure of success doing simply because we are driven. The motivation causes us to continue on without giving up, regardless of any opposition. At my home church, we have several declarations we make aloud each and every week. As a congregation, we stand and we say, "We are here to know God, find freedom, discover purpose, and make a difference." And this is true for all of God's children. Consider the many stories in the Bible that bear witness to each of us having a specific place in God's plans, which is why we are born at the time in the earth's history and God's timeline we are. We are born with a God-given purpose. We are born in the point in time God intends for us to accomplish that purpose. We are born into the family or the environment that we are to be trained and equipped. Even the evil opposition we encounter can and will be used by God to better prepare us to accomplish His will for our lives, providing it is His will we choose to do. If we reject God altogether, or as a believer we choose to go our own path, we will not be able to fulfill our God-given purpose. We will have set ourselves on another path. We will always have a choice, not only in starting out, but in every step on the path of life. Consider the story of Cain and Abel, Genesis chapter 4. Consider the story of Joseph, Genesis 37. Consider the story of Esther, the entire book of Esther. Consider the story of the prodigal son in Luke 15, verses 11 to 32. Cain rejected God's plan for his life, never repenting, and went on to influence others to also reject God. Joseph was cruelly sold into slavery by his brothers, imprisoned for years, and was freed only to be wrongly accused and returned to prison, to ultimately be made second in command to Pharaoh in Egypt, eventually sparing the region from famine and being reunited with his father and his brothers. Esther was essentially kidnapped and forced into King Ahasuerus' harem. Some scholars or commentators describe this as a form of sexual trafficking or abduction. Her older cousin and adoptive father, unable to fully protect her, did what he could, wisely guiding her to conceal her Jewish identity. Then, sharing the revelation that she was in unique position to save the Jewish people in that region, which she bravely did, knowingly risking her life. The prodigal son was born into a good life with a father and brother who loved him. He became enamored with the world beyond his family and chose to leave, even demanding his inheritance from his father, which was akin to telling his father he considered him as good as dead. He squandered his inheritance, living according to the ways of the world apart from God, and ultimately found himself living among the pigs, even eating their slop. Coming to his senses, he decided to return to his father in all humility, being willing to be a slave there, knowing it was better than the life he was living. Yet, when his father saw him from afar, abandoning his dignity of that culture, he ran to meet his wayward son, even interrupting his son's prepared speech, and immediately embraced and restored him to the family. These are excellent examples of what we may encounter and the choices we can make in our lives. While I will have more to say to help us in finding our God-created purpose in the days and time we're living in the next few weeks, let me now take us a bit in a different direction, although still very much connected. Our modern-day prophets are servants of God who help us to know what God is doing in the present. More than one prophet has said we should expect 2026 to be an explosive year, even starting out as such, and Robin Bullock was clear 2026 would be the year of the fix. Amanda Grace has been clear God revealed for 2026 we can expect January to be a month of justice, February to be a ferocious month, followed by a roar in the month of March. With that in mind, let's consider events that have taken place in just the first 2 months of January. Let me also share these events from a perspective of those who are not seeking to view them from God's perspective. We have President Trump's capture of Venezuelan's illegitimate president, Maduro, which many in Congress and mainstream media claim was a declaration of war that Congress did not approve, and that President Trump is aggressively acting to gain control of Venezuela's oil as part of his efforts to dominate the Western Hemisphere. We have President Trump's threat to step in against the Islamic Republic of Iran for the slaughter of their own people who are protesting the tyrannical regime, a number that, as of the writing of this podcast, is estimated to be at 12,000. And Trump's statements to increase tariffs to countries doing business with Iran have many people decrying foreign interference into Iran's business. We also have President Trump's efforts to acquire Greenland somehow, which many claim is evidence of Trump's efforts to conquer the nation and have control over China and Russia's access, and gain control of minerals and Arctic energy projects, which some claim is resisted by senior United States military officials and not supported by Congress. We have President Trump's strikes against ISIS in Syria and Nigeria that mainstream media is characterizing as vengeance and retaliatory and ineffective. There's also President Trump placing both Cuba and Mexico in a state of stern warning to discontinue their involvement with human and drug trafficking, which is being characterized as aggressive, hostile threats, and economic coercion in assertion of United States dominance in the Western Hemisphere. We have President Trump continuing to empower ICE to remove horrible criminals from Minnesota in massive fraud investigations that have now exposed fraud in Michigan, Illinois, Ohio, New York, and California, and elsewhere, which many are characterizing as cruel, nonsensical political retaliation that is the cause for increased violence and even death in these areas. We have President Trump and the United States Department of Justice conducting criminal investigation into the Federal Reserve's multi-year project to renovate historical Federal Reserve office buildings, which is being characterized as a fiasco and an ugly feud, while all the heads of major central banks worldwide have voiced full solidarity with the United States Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell. And we have President Trump's elevated focus on election fraud, with major focus on the United States 2020 elections, as well as election frauds worldwide, which has many people declaring Trump is using election fraud as a new weapon of retaliation. And this is just 8 major events that have happened in less than the first 2 weeks of 2026. The reason it is vitally important for each of us to identify our God-created purpose and to take the necessary steps to prepare and position ourselves to find where we are to serve is precisely because 2026 is the year of the fix. 2026 is the Hebrew year 5786, which is the year of the letter Vav, which is characterized by divine connections. This is the year when God has adequately exposed all manner of evil wherever it exists, so that as he executes his judgment and he removes evil men and women from leadership positions, his appointed men, women, and children can step into their rightful place of service as part of his fix of evil regimes. God has been working in you and working in me, preparing us to step into our God-intended purpose for these very days. And I'm encouraging you to be willing and ready for what is immediately upon us. I'm not saying God is done with his process of exposing evil, but that he is at a place in his plan where his judgment and justice will be evident throughout this year of 2026, the year of the fix. And you, my dear listeners, are part of God's fix as you step into your God-created purpose. Like the sons of Issachar we read about in 1 Chronicles 12:32, we need to seek to know the times so we know what God is doing in order to know how he wants us to respond for his will to be done on earth as it is in heaven. Let me now readdress some of those 8 major events we are dealing with to understand them from God's perspective. Not to understand them as I first mentioned them, which is the world's perspective, but to understand them from God's perspective. We've learned by now mainstream media is owned by the deep state, who seeks to protect their evil advancements, consistent with taking this world down the path to total evil control. Naturally, they only report events from their perspective to further their agenda. We need to be as the sons of Issachar and press into God through the studying of his written word and his spoken prophetic words. Then we need to take our place in God's plan to partner with him to see his kingdom will done on earth as it is in heaven. We first need to know President Trump is appointed and anointed by God for these very days. He's been likened to King Cyrus of the Old Testament, who was not a Jew, but one who was called by God to greatly restore the Jewish people and God's righteous rule through government. Prophetically, God has also referred to President Trump as, quote, my David, meaning like King David of the Old Testament, President Trump has a heart that's after God's own heart. Donald Trump was pursued by what I'll call the God Squad of our United States military, who knew the full extent of corruption in the United States government and recognized what Donald Trump possessed in character and experience was exactly what was needed in a man in the role of president to be able to stand up to the deep state establishment, to break away from their hundreds of years of evil control, to reestablish the United States and its government to what God intended. Donald Trump had a choice to step into his God-intended purpose or not, just as you do, just as I do. Learning what was being asked of him and what he would have to give up, what he would have to risk, and what he would have to endure, he went before the Lord to prayerfully decide. In that process, he caught a glimpse of what could be accomplished if he partnered with God, and it was enough for him to say yes. God did not provide Donald Trump with a clear understanding of everything he would experience going forward. Neither will God do that for you. Instead, God will give us just enough of what we need to know to see if we will agree to step out in faith and trust Him for the promised outcome. I wonder what the specific promised outcomes were that God gave Donald Trump. But one I can be certain of was if Donald Trump would do what God asked of him, God would guide him every step of the way as he yielded to God, so that in the end, evil would be overcome and the United States would be a leader among nations to set all God's people free from evil in governments worldwide. God will show you some of the promised outcomes you can expect if you say yes to what He's asking of you. He won't show you all you can expect, rather just enough to see if by faith, given everything He has already done for you, what you are willing to do for Him. As I have learned, especially since starting this podcast, evil has been working through people and governments for centuries. Since the time of the founding of the United States, the British Empire has sought to maintain control of the majority of the nations of the world, including the United States. This is a very difficult truth for many people to accept, and in fact, they are fiercely opposing this truth. Regardless, as events are unfolding before our very eyes, there will come a time, and likely this year, when many more people will have to admit the greatest threat to Western civilizations for hundreds of years has been the British Empire, who is the leader of the efforts for a one-world government. A good place to learn about the history of the world control by the British elite is Promethean Action. I have a link for you in the show notes. I will try to provide a summary review to help us understand present-day events, but I do encourage you to do your own deeper study. I have taught about the establishment of central banks through the Rothschild family with prior podcasts and how they have been the world financiers for centuries. I've also taught about the 13 ruling families of the world and how they have ultimately become the heads of efforts for a one-world government, with an agenda that has been hundreds of years in the making, which they believed would be accomplished by the year 2030, putting them in complete charge of the nations of the world. However, what they didn't expect was God's intervention, because the leaders of the one-world government have no regard for God. As we are seeing, just as God used King Cyrus for his purpose in the past, so was God working through President Donald Trump in our days. Part of their globalist strategy to gain more and more control is to keep nations at war. Globalists fund both sides of the wars, allowing them to profit and allowing them to cause the nations involved to be financially indebted to them, giving them leverage to direct the future of the nations. The British Empire and the European Union have been behind the narrative that Russia is the world's enemy, a narrative that President Trump is challenging. In reality, President Trump is in the process of liberating the United States from the British elite and building sovereign nations around the Western Hemisphere. The United States is on the offensive now and is winning. President Trump has been exposing and crushing foreign policy, economic systems and policies, insurance cartels, drug cartels, beef cartels, big bank housing investments, defense contractors, and more. He has been working to expose fraud and waste everywhere, beginning with Doge, leading to the tax dollar fraud and money laundering in Minnesota, which has exposed many other states and foreign nations. President Trump has been clear he does not want war or loss of lives, which has driven him to end at least 8 wars and is inspiring him to defend the people of Iran who are being murdered by their own evil regime. If you remember, when President Trump worked with Israel to bomb Iran's nuclear powers, he was accused then of seeking to take over the Iranian government. President Trump was quick to respond he didn't want that, but he hoped the people of Iran would see their chance to change their government for their betterment. President Trump is being accused of invading Venezuela because of their oil reserves. This is far too narrow a view. While the oil is one component, President Trump is working to establish a Western Hemisphere of independent sovereign nations that are stable in and of themselves. Venezuela has been under narco cartel with financial ties to the British Empire and offshore banking. President Trump wants the resources developed for Venezuelan people in a way that they prosper and the world benefits from their oil exports. Under Chavez and Maduro, the oil production has been reduced to 20% of its capacity. The United States was heavily invested in helping Venezuela build their oil production, only for the British Empire to control the government leaders for the purpose of furthering the one world government agenda. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard has major operations in Venezuela, with Venezuela being the staging ground for lots of nasty ops, also involving Cuba and Mexico, specific to human and drug trafficking and illegal immigration to the United States in effort to work against the United States. Canada, especially under Mark Carney, who is a major proxy for the British Empire, is a highly strategic nation for Great Britain. China has been allowed to bring its military to practice on Canadian soil because of Canada's shared border with the United States. Mark Carney is a poster boy for the British Empire's desire for a one world order as the only non-Englishman to head up the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada, making him the banker of bankers. Greenland is an in-your-face strategy of Donald Trump against the British Empire. If Donald Trump can sever Greenland's link to Denmark, it would be a victory against both the Dutch and British monarchy. Greenland belongs to Denmark as an artifact of imperial policy. Greenland didn't even get their self-government until 2009, while the Dutch crown still has power over Greenland's foreign affairs, currency, and military defense. According to Danish media, the people of Greenland are asking to meet with President Trump without the presence of Denmark. If Donald Trump somehow liberates Greenland, he would be dismantling one of the last vestiges of European colonial control in the Western Hemisphere. The NATO military arm of the old imperial system knows if Greenland goes, the whole one world structure starts to crumble. While the controlled mainstream media decries it's about Russia and China, claiming them to be our real enemy, the truth is the enemy is Britain and Canada with their plans for a one world government. If you look at a map from the North Pole down, you'll see Greenland lies between Britain and North America. Also, we know President Trump will soon be traveling to Davos, Switzerland, to again speak at the World Economic Forum, the platform for the globalists. What we should watch for is for him to be putting them on notice of the many nations who are no longer under their control and providing the globalists their conditions for surrender. In all of this, President Trump is regularly addressing the fraud of the 2020 election and others. He isn't harping on an old grudge, as many mainstream media claim. He is alerting people of the soon-to-be hard evidence that will prove election fraud in time to protect the upcoming midterm elections, which is a most powerful strategy against the deep state globalist agenda to control the election outcomes in this last election effort to completely infiltrate the United States. Our modern-day prophets have been addressing world events, including the United States midterm elections. We need to know how very important these midterms are for the sovereignty of our nation and the nations of the world, and to be actively engaged in the election process, helping people to know the truth, getting people registered, helping as many as possible to get to the polls. It's a task we need to become involved in now in these months leading up to the midterm elections. We need to also pray for the protection of President Trump and all those whom God has appointed to serve with him, consistent with what the prophets have said, We need to pray for the swift removal of any and all traitors in President Trump's administration. We need to pray for President Trump's stamina and energy levels, for him to be able to accomplish everything God has in mind, remembering what President Trump is doing is not for himself. What he is tirelessly doing is not for selfish gain or ambition, as the mainstream media would have us believe. It is instead to restore freedom to the people and liberate the people from the world of evil, tyrannical regimes. It is to be obedient to what God has asked of him. And I hope each and every one of us will be willing to do what God asks of us. I need to stop here for today, but I will pick up with this entire theme for each of us needing to know what God wants of us in partnership with him to see his plans come to pass with next week's podcast. But please don't misunderstand me. God's plans will be fulfilled whether we partner with him or not. However, knowing those who choose to partner with God in obedience out of a desire to see his will done will be completely within his protection and provision as all literal hell breaks loose this year. I'm doing everything possible to invest in you, to invest in your best interest. I want as many people as possible to not only know the truth, but to embrace and live it out for the benefit of many and all for God's glory. Now, I ask you to please listen to my closing announcements and to take advantage of the many goods and services I bring you in an effort to at least cover the costs of this podcast. If you like what you hear from me with this podcast, I highly recommend my book series, my award-winning blog, and consider signing up for my certificate course in apologetics. My aim with that course is to help people learn how not only to use apologetics to share truth with others, but to help Christian leaders incorporate apologetics into their respective ministries so more Christians are learning how to share their faith. You can learn more by using the link in the show notes. For now, I offer my weekly podcasts, my blog, and bi-monthly e-newsletter at no cost. And certainly I have hard costs associated with doing all I do. If you've been blessed by my work and would like to help my work reach others, why not consider partnering with me? For as little as $10 a month, you can become a partner. Then together we can reach even more people for Jesus. Simply visit my Pamela Christian Ministries homepage and then click on the Give button at the top menu bar. Or if you prefer, you can go directly to the Give page using the link in the show notes. To become a partner, you can use my PayPal or Venmo account, but you will also see other ways you can support my work on that page. Whether you choose to become a monthly partner, give a one-time donation, purchase my books and products from my web store, or support my affiliate sponsors, anything you can do to help me continue this work would be greatly appreciated. And as always, your prayers and telling others about me and my ministry work is much needed. When it comes to my selection of affiliate sponsors, I first look for Christian-owned and operated businesses, and I make a point of personally using the products or services so I can fully endorse them. I seek sponsors that offer products or services you can get via the internet worldwide, and I specifically consider what is common to most people universally. So you'll find health, beauty, and wellness products through Dr. Zelenko's Z-Stack supplements and from QE Strong. Dr. Zelenko's Z-Stack supplements are truly amazing and are available to my listeners for a 5% discount per purchase or a 10% discount for a monthly subscription using the promo code FTLB. You may have heard my interview with Rob Renee about QE Strong. Discover the benefits of quantum energy to overcome all sorts of ailments. Visit QEstrong.com and use the promo code FTLB at checkout to receive your discount. Then my newest affiliate I'm really excited to bring you is Q Streaming. That's CUE Streaming Television. People with United States addresses can get over 3,000 channels, including live TV with streaming television without a contract. Get all of your local networks and favorite movie and sports and pay-per-view channels for about half of what cable costs. See the video promo link in the show notes to learn more. Affiliate sponsors only provide financial support to me when you purchase what they offer. So before you support Amazon or any other retailer, if I offer what you're looking for, please purchase through me. When it comes to special occasions, birthdays, or Christmas gifts, consider my books, jewelry, CDs, and more from my web store or any of the affiliate goods and services I offer. When you purchase from my web store, be sure to use the promo code TRUTH, TRUTH, to receive a 20% discount. Again, you'll find all the links in the show notes. If you like the content and resource material I bring you with this podcast, you'll find much more by connecting with me through my blog. In fact, my blog has been awarded 2 unsolicited awards for Christian content. And I'm also very active on social media. I can cover much more on social media than I can with this weekly podcast. And if you're not already subscribed, please subscribe to my complimentary bi-monthly e-newsletter. I offer encouragement, special offers, and one of my signature recipes with each and every edition. Yep, I'm a foodie and I love to entertain, which is why Faith, Family, Friends, and Food is a bonus segment of my bi-monthly e-newsletter. To receive even more, please be sure to check out my dedicated podcast listeners page, Beyond the Podcast. Here's where we can connect exclusively and you can download complimentary devotionals, resources, and more. On that page, I also ask you to help me learn more about you and what you want by completing the form visible once you scroll down that page. And something that is very easy for you to do and would mean a lot to me is for you to rate, subscribe, or comment on this podcast according to what your preferred listening platform allows. You know how it works. The more likes and subscriptions to this podcast, the more opportunity we have to expand the listening audience. And that means we can reach more people with the gospel message of Jesus while helping people learn how to better apply their Christian faith. I hope you'll join me next week and tell your friends and family to listen right here on Faith to Live By, where we learn how to gain spiritual victory over life's issues. Until next week, I'm Pam Christian, asking you to remember Christ died for us. The least we can do is live for Him.